My name is Nikki Mullowney, and I am a grateful, recovered drug addict and an alcoholic. So I wanted to hop on here and talk about the 4th step. Honestly, all of the steps I can sit here and talk about for God knows how long. But today, I spent some time with a group of women in early sobriety, and we're doing a little big book study. And the 4th step ended up coming up, especially the 4th column of the 4th step. And from the knowledge that I've acquired and the experience that I've had in this program over the last 6 years of actually being sober, and then 4 years before that, having sobriety, bouts of sobriety, being around the rooms, learning a lot about the book, learning a lot from people who know a lot about the book and the program, yada yada. Plus my own experience and interpretation of things, I've picked up some stuff. And I've worked in a bunch of treatment centers, and currently not doing that right now, right? But one thing that I've never lost is the passion. It might have seemed that way a couple times, right? Because just burnout is a real thing, right? But you get me talking about the step work and just forget about it. I'm all over the place, right? The last place that I worked at treated substance abuse and trauma. There was definitely a necessity there of being trauma informed. And I think that anytime that we're doing step work, we should be trauma informed anyway. And that's one of the cool things about, I believe in the text, I believe in what it says, and the foundation of it. And there are certain areas that's let's expand on that. I think that we have a bad habit of when something in the book or in the step work seems off to somebody, or daunting, we yell at them that they're just not willing enough, right? And sometimes that's true, and sometimes there's something else there. So how do we, as people in long-term recovery, right, who have an understanding of this work, do a better job of presenting this work in a way that is more digestible for more people without changing it? Right? Because words matter, tone matters, how we present things matter, right? And my primary purpose is to carry the message to the still suffering alcoholic, addict, whatever. I literally don't care, right? That's my whole gig, is trying to make this, present this in a way that is digestible so that they can hear it, they can digest it, and they can put it in practice, and they can be sober. For good and for keeps. Not just one day at a time, holding on, fighting to stay sober. That sounds miserable. I want freedom. I want to be placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, like the book promises me. Right. So, at this place, and that's where I went to do this big book study today, we ended up getting on the topic about the 4th step. We weren't even in how it works. We were in the family afterward. Actually, we were at 2 employers. I went back to the family afterward because I'm like, hold on, let's talk about this real quick. But, I don't believe that there's a such thing as isolated incidents. So everything really comes back to everything in this text. We end up on the topic of the 4th step, and I always get really amped up about the 4th column, right? So, in my experience, and listen, I'm just one fucking person. Take what I say or leave it. But if you're having a really hard time with the step work and how things are presented, and you just want a different perspective, then maybe this is the one. Maybe this can help you. And if not, then go ahead and X out of this and keep scrolling or whatever it is that you do, and Nikki Mullowney's a fucking idiot. Who cares, right? But here's how I see it. So, a few things that we misinterpret and we get wrong, not wrong, but where it doesn't serve us as well as it could, right? So for anyone who doesn't know, a 4th step is an inventory of self. There's 3 different parts. We have resentment inventory, fear inventory, and sex conduct inventory, and we write it all on paper, right? I don't do this typing my 4th step shit. That's weird. I'm going to put pen to paper, and I'm going to get it really clear, and I'm going to start to reorganize the chaos that is inside of me so that I can start getting connected to a higher power. If you want to call that God, great. If you want to call that higher self, great. Collective consciousness, universe, spirit of the universe, I don't care, right? I literally don't care. I myself am not a religious human. I'm not Christian. I'm not Jew. I'm not any of the things. I have my own conception that we could talk about later if you so choose. Happy to do it. But anyway, I'm just talking about the first part, which is the resentment inventory. I can go into all the other things, but I'm not going to do that right now. So the resentment inventory, we have 4 columns for the resentment inventory. First column is literally just who or what. What are you mad at, right? And not even necessarily mad, right? I was taught that resentment just means to re-feel something, right? Sentiment, right? And to go further than that, re-feel like a negative feeling about any given thing or person or whatever, right? So it could be marriage, it could be divorce, it could be religion, it could be God, it could be me, it could be you, right? I personally don't put myself on my resentment inventory because I already think about myself enough. And I don't need to give myself a platform to just sit there and kick my own ass more than I already do. And everything I'm mad at myself about should come out in my 4th column for other people. It's just the truth, right? First thing, right, just the name, right? So I'm mad at, let's say, the examples I like to go toward are like the childhood trauma ones, because those are the ones I feel like we get really weird about, right? Let's just say it's a parent. I'm not gonna go into who or what or where. Let's just say it's a parent. And let's say this parent is an alcoholic. So let's give this parent a name. Parent's name is Sean. So Sean is an alcoholic, right? Sean abuses another parent of mine. Sean chooses alcohol over me. Spends all of our money on booze and weed. So we're always just like fucking living day by day, financially and mentally, spiritually, all that stuff, right? So this is all in the second column, right? I'm just listing why I still have ill feelings, right? So as I'm listing these things, notice I'm not sitting there and journaling and writing this whole fucking novel about why I'm upset, you know, and all these opinions. I'm like, he's a piece of shit. Like, I can, right? But just keep it short and sweet, man. Bullet points. Because here's the truth, is I've talked about these things my entire life, and I'm still getting loaded. So maybe talking about the problem isn't the solution. Hear me when I say it's important. Please go to therapy. What the 12 steps did for me is it laid a foundation of honesty and clarity and awareness so that therapy could actually be effective. Because my truth is I've been in therapy since I was in preschool, maybe kindergarten. I'm not sure, but I think younger, right? Because, you know, I was born addicted to crack and like all sorts of stuff, right? So I was like mandated to be in counseling and yada yada. And I didn't know any truth about myself or understand me at all to have it be effective. I wanted help. Like, that's my truth. Like, I've been miserable as long as I can remember. And I wanted to not be. But the needed power wasn't there. Right? So I'm going to save all that, like, going into it and processing and yada yada with my therapist. Because the person I'm about to sit across from is probably not licensed to help me sort through the processing, right? We're just trying to get clear on what happened and how I showed up, right? So, second column, why? Bullet points. Boom. Next. Cool. Now we got the third column, which is how it affects my 7 areas of self. That's self-esteem, pride, security, ambition, personal relations, sex relations, and pocketbook. That's it. So there are 2 ways that you can do that, right? So the first way is just writing down what was affected. The second way is what we call an extended third column, where I write down what was affected and then how, right? So self-esteem is how I see myself. I am not worthy of love. I am not worthy of being protected. I am not, good enough for people to do the right thing. Blah, blah, blah. Pride is how I want other people to see me. I am, no one should disrespect me. People should see my worth. People should love me. People should choose me over alcohol, right? Personal relations is like, who is this person to me? This person is my parent. So a good parent should, right? My expectations on that personal relationship. A good parent is a protector. A good parent is a provider. A good parent seeks help when they can't do it themselves, yada, yada, yada. Sex relations actually has nothing to do with sex, the way that I was taught it, which is more like gender relations. Like, how do I see that sex, right? So, like, a good man should be a protector, a provider, yada, 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 right? Which now I'm seeing my sexism and all this different shit, right? Ambition is what I want. I want certainty. I want security. I want love. I want normalcy. I want a normal family. I want to feel good enough. I want him to apologize. I want him to acknowledge what he's done to me, right? I want pity. Like, let's get real. If we're gonna get real, let's get fucking real, right? Security is what I need to be okay. So at this stage in the game, when I'm writing it, I'm just trying to be honest about what I think I need, right? I need him to acknowledge what he's done. I need him to stop gaslighting me. I need them, collectively, to show up for me. Whatever the case may be, right? Later on in the deal, we see that kind of evolves. Then we have pocketbook is just money. How is my money affected? I never got an allowance because he was always buying alcohol. I never, yada yada, whatever, right? I think that's all of them. So the other way that we do, right, so that's the extended version, and then just the standard version that's in the big book is just what was affected, right? Self-esteem, pride, ambition, yada yada, right? So that's how I do it now, just because it's in the big book that way. I'm trying to not get into all these different areas. However, I do think it's important at some point for all of us. I mean, maybe not all of us, but it was definitely important for me, and sometimes it still is, to go back and do the extended version, just for the sake of awareness, because that's really what I'm trying to go for here. Awareness is key. I cannot change anything. I cannot have a solution to a problem unless I am aware of the problem. I cannot make change unless I'm aware of what I'm trying to change, right? So, anyway, that's the third column. Real simple and easy, right? Zip, zap, zap. Zip, zap, zap. Zip, zip. You know what I'm trying to say. Zip, zap. Whatever the fuck. Whatever. Okay. So then, we go to the fourth column. And I know, and listen, here's the thing. A lot of times, people are like, Nikki, it's semantics. It's not a big deal. I get that. And sometimes it is semantics. However, words matter, right? Words matter. So when you look at me, right, and you look at little Nikki, and she's writing her first 4-step. I'm writing it about my parent, and I'm writing it all this stuff from childhood, right? And then you look at me, and you say, okay, what's your part in that? Ooh, I just shut down. Because the truth is my parent being an alcoholic, my parent being abusive, I have no part in that. Nor does the big book tell me that I do, right? The big book says we resolutely look for our mistakes. It also refers to it as the key to the future, right? Yes, it does say we look for our faults and where were we to blame. However, the way that I interpret that, take it or leave it, is where am I to blame for my own misery? I'm not to blame for that stuff, and the book tells me that, right? Like, sometimes it's not your deal, right? It's not your gig, it's not your fault. However, like, this is how I read it, how have you exacerbated your own misery using this as a justification, right? That I can get down with, right? So on my fourth column, I'm looking for my mistakes. Now, a lot of times we hear the word mistake, and there's an immediate negative connotation to that. I don't see it that way anymore. Same thing with, like, so in the fourth column, I'm going to write down in my mistakes, how was I selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and frightened, afraid, whatever, right? Selfish, all those things, you look at, why are you so selfish? There's this negative connotation that's like, you are bad. That's not how I hear it. I'm not bad. Right? Selfish is not inherently bad. Selfish is disconnecting me from other humans, right? Mistakes are not inherently bad, right? Or these things that like, oh, I'm such a horrible human. That's just not true. I'm not a horrible human. I'm actually a really good human who is very, very lost and very, very sick for a long time, right? When I'm looking at my mistakes, the way that I hear it today is How did I show up that does not serve me and is not beneficial to me? Just getting really clear on the ways that I showed up that no longer serve me and I want to change. So I have to be very, very honest. So when I write down selfish, right, and I'm talking about childhood trauma, a selfish thought, right, is something like, I blamed myself for his alcoholism. That is inherently selfish. It's not bad. I'm not this terrible human for thinking, of course I thought that. My little child brain, I'm just trying to sort through the world and navigate and figure out why people do what they do and why things happen the way that they do and why I'm having to go through this. Totally checks out. However, to the belief that I am powerful enough to cause this man to be an alcoholic doesn't make sense. And I'm placing myself in this position of power that isn't mine, right? It's just not mine. So, it's selfish. The thought that no one could possibly understand what I'm going through. It's selfish and dishonest, right? Because it's just not true. Other people do understand. Of course I don't see that. Of course I don't get that. Of course I feel this way. I can have empathy for that part of myself. I can have so much compassion for the human that thought the things that I thought and still be like, ooh, that is disconnecting me from the world. That is placing me in a position that is just not factual, right? So I'm just trying to get into a factual playing field here. Objectively, it's selfish, right? Then I have stuff like hypocrisy, because the truth is, I'm a little heroin addict, right? And he's an alcoholic, and I'm sitting there and just judging him and condemning him for his alcoholism while I'm in there in my room in their house shooting dope. So it was hypocritical. Does it make sense? Of course it does. Do I hate myself for thinking that way? Of course I don't. 100% I thought that way. What else would I think? And it doesn't work, right? Because again, I don't believe that there's any such thing as an isolated incident, right? So if I am thinking that no one understands how I feel with this certain thing, then I'm thinking that about a lot of other different stuff, and it's just not true. If I felt it, other people have felt it, right? Which also comes down to, I am an addict because of these things. Here's the thing. There are people who just use drugs to like cope, and then given sufficient reason to stop, they do. I'm not one of those people. I am a true blue drug addict and alcoholic. No matter, I moved from New York to Texas to escape addiction, and I ended up with a fucking possession felony charge, right? So like I wasn't around heroin addicts. I found it. After detoxing myself dozens of times, trying so hard to stop. I wanted to stop so bad, and I couldn't. Right? So my point is that, like, he's not the reason why I'm an addict. My brain is the reason why I'm an addict. I'm not even the reason why I'm an addict. It's not my fault. Right? It's a mental illness with a physical factor. Right? So it's not my fault. However, it's my responsibility. Right, so to sit there and be like, oh, well, I use and I do this and I do that because of him. I haven't lived with him since I was 13. You're 21. What are you doing? You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. So I'm sitting there and blaming and blame shifting. It's a mistake, right? And the belief that if you understood what I was going through, you would use too. Ugh. That's selfish. Not bad, not wrong, none of those things. But it is selfish. Because the truth that I had to get down with is that I dismissed other people's feelings to justify my actions. Right? So I have friends who went through incredibly similar things, but they don't react the way that I react. So my assumption is they don't feel things the way that I feel things, which is incredibly dismissive. So dismissive. And I think it really hurts the stigma of addiction, right? So like me and this human both lose somebody, right? Our friend dies. I go and do heroin. They don't. Why are you doing this? Because they died. You don't understand how I feel. I don't produce unique emotions. My brain tells me that because I'm feeling this, I have to use, but my brain telling me that is the actual problem, right? The mental obsession, lying to me. That's step one. That's a whole other thing, right? My point is I have to get clear on these things in my fourth column, right? So believing I'm the reason why he drank, wrong. Or, you know what I mean? No moral judgment here, but it's just not true. Write it down. Believing that I can treat men like shit because I believe that all men are the same because of my experience with this human. Ugh, yikes, right? Because mistakes can be before, during, and or after, right? So the self-destruct, the refusing to get honest with people. It makes sense. I'm in survival mode and it doesn't work and it's not beneficial. It doesn't serve me anymore. So I'm going to write it down so I can get clear on what I need to do to change it so that I can do something that serves me and is beneficial, right? And this goes with other stuff, man. Right? Because what I'm putting here can also apply to SA, right? Believing it's your fault. It's not your fault, right? Believing that it's an excuse to self-destruct for the rest of your life and not allowing people to love you. Of course you did. Completely makes sense. I'm not judging you. No shade at all. I totally get it. And are we willing to try something different now? Let's just look at it. We're going to get it all down on paper. That's the whole point of the fourth step, right? Like in theory, we're taught history so that we know what happened historically so we don't repeat the mistakes. That's not really what happened. I'm not going to go into all of that. That's not what I'm here to talk about. But that's what I'm doing with my life and my brain, right? It's just a history lesson on me. I think I know myself and I think I know how I show up, but then when I actually write it down, I realize I don't. The amount of things I learned about myself just from a little bit of willingness to write it down and be as honest as I was capable of at the time, right? Because the big book talks about perfecting and enlarging your spiritual life, right? And perfect does not mean to make perfect. It means to make something as good as it possibly can be at any given time, right? So I didn't have some of the memories that I have now, right? Like, I didn't know the amends that I owed back then that I do now, so now I have to go back and do it. That's what I got. Hopefully that helps somebody who's struggling with a 4-step or whatever. Please remember that you don't have to stay sober one day at a time. You know, this isn't about going to meetings and just holding on to sobriety for dear life. My experience has been when I'm willing to do this, and I actually do it, because willingness without action is delusion, right? I'm just lying to myself. Freedom happens. And that freedom, the byproduct of that is sobriety, right? The goal here is permanent sobriety. In the beginning, that might seem like a hard pill to swallow if you want to do the one day at a time thing in the beginning, of course. Totally cool. 30 days and 1,000 nights makes sense. It's not an overnight matter. But my experience and the experience of many others I've watched walk through this says that you can become recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. You're not going to be fighting temptation. Triggers don't exist. I'm not talking about trauma or emotional triggers. I'm talking about triggers to go get loaded. They don't exist. I get loaded because of this. So I clear out this with the step work. And shit happens. I don't have a monopoly on God. I don't have a monopoly on sobriety and recovery. If you take a different path, awesome. Good for you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do here. However, all I'm saying is, if you're doing the step work and you're hitting a wall, I got a lot of ideas. And I love talking about it. So, let me know if you want more. Also, like and follow for meditations. Starting to work on that again. Get that back up. And whatever else we might do. So, alright. Peace out.